it's Maryanne. Welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. If you're new here, I work with nonprofit leaders. I'm basically like a performance coach for nonprofit leaders. I help them get the most out of themselves and everyone around them. And today I'm going to talk about how we think and feel, and especially about money, and how affects that our ability to raise it. Let me tell you a little bit about why this is important. So first, I want to share that my journey increasingly over the years, as I work with clients and work with nonprofit leaders from all over the country and Canada and other parts of this beautiful world. What I have learned is that we can't communicate effectively if we want to communicate well externally, we need to be communicating well internally. And to communicate well internally, that means conscious leadership, the ability to navigate ourselves, to understand how our thoughts and feelings contribute to our day-to-day, everyday decision making, and how to bring that out and bring that forward in others. Because once we do that, then we can create effective teams, and from that place, we're going to communicate externally. And also what I have learned over the years, and even though I'm a words person and I love words and I love messaging and all that, had a whole career doing that, I used to say, our words shape our reality. We know that. That's why we spend so much time crafting our messaging, crafting our materials and things, because we want to make sure we're communicating the right thing. But what I've learned, the big key, I think the big takeaway, since I started my business, is really that our thoughts shape our words and our words shape our reality. So before I was focused on words, reality, and you know what? That worked. But as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. So what I started to wonder is, why do some people really take to the strategies and coaching and other, people and organizations don't? And I realized that the strategy, right, was one part of the piece, but the mindset was another part. So if their mindset was open and engaged, the strategies would work. If their mindset was closed, the strategies wouldn't work. So it's important that we understand that our thoughts shape our words shape our reality. And it really starts with how we think and feel. And nowhere does that show up more than in fundraising, right? Fundraising is like the trigger perfect storm. You have money, which is a trigger, right? Like, people would rather talk about sex than money. Money is a trigger in itself. Asking for help, that that can open up feelings of vulnerability and guilt and shame around that, and the possibility of rejection. So between money, the possibility of rejection, and the vulnerability of asking for help, fundraising can be pretty uncomfortable. And also in our culture, we have some beliefs, and I feel like we alternately worship and demonize money at the same time, and often don't understand it. And when you understand, every person, let me start again. Every person has a money story, and your money story is your attitudes towards money, brought on mostly by childhood experiences. And that belief, that money story, those beliefs about money, show up in your present day, everyday decision making around money. So in order to fundraise more effectively, it's important to understand your money story, understand any limiting beliefs or blocks that you may have, and create a better story. I'm going to tell you a little anecdotal story from a few years back. This was before the pandemic, if I can even remember that. Fall of 2019, I was in Chicago, training a group of 20 nonprofits who a foundation had given some money to provide training. And I was doing a workshop on money mindset and fundraising, and how we think and feel shows up in our ability to raise money, and how to remove those blocks and barriers to really be open to receptivity. And we were in this beautiful training room, and it was new, and it was at a Y somewhere. Anyway, it was this beautiful space. like, oh, this is a lovely space. And then an attendee, a participant, walked in a few minutes later and she said, well, I guess they have money. And I just noted that comment. I didn't say anything. I just observed that comment. And later on, as we were, exploring this topic, I brought it up. I said, when you walked in, you said, wow, look at this. And she said, right. And, because to them, they had money and that was a bad thing. Right. And she labeled them as this very nice space, like, oh, this, like, there's almost a judgment that this was a misappropriation of funds. And it was really interesting because through that dialogue, what I learned was that she has a kind of a resentment towards money, and she wound up working for an organization that felt the same way. She aligned that belief with the place that she was working for, and what did it make? Fundraising a struggle for them, right? Because they were in judgment of organizations who, quote unquote, had money or made money. And in that resentment, it's hard to open up the channels of receptivity. Now, another little story that happened a different day is I was working with someone who was the president of a board of one organization. She was also on staff at another one, but she was there in the capacity of a board president. And she was talking about how frustrating it is because her ED was kind of like fast and loose with the budget. Like they'd always break even, but he's like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And she's like, I don't know. And she was explaining this to me. And my next comment was, so tell me about your childhood. And she was like, what? I'm like, tell me about your childhood. What was it like growing up? And she told me that she was the only child of a single mother, that they struggled financially, that her mom worked really hard, but there was always economic scarcity around them and fear that there would not be insecurity. There would not be enough money. She faced a lot of economic insecurity. And so one of the things that she developed was the pendulum swung the other way. And she said, I am going to be very secure. She was a saver and investor. She said, I will not feel insecure again. I am creating wealth for myself so that I can create economic security for me. And so if that's your money story, right, that you have to save and be conscious, because if you don't, you'll go into economic insecurity. Now she's paired with an executive director who probably has a very different money story. His money story is probably like, the money shows up eventually, we'll be fine. And now, so basically they're having this difficulty, but they're having this difficulty because they're like kids. The belief systems that they adopted as kids were now present for them as adults. And until we stand back and say, why is that upsetting for me? Like, what's going on here? Like, we're almost watching ourselves in a movie and not judging, is it right or wrong, but just saying, wow, that's some really interesting information. That makes me really uncomfortable because he does that, because he's plays fast and loose with the budget in her definition, right? That's what he was doing. And so when we can step back and get outside of those beliefs and look at them, then we can break through them. And then we can bring in other information and make more powerful, more complete decisions. When she realized, oh, that's where that story is. Now I get it. Then she could see it more objectively. And she wasn't judging his behavior as bad and her behavior as good. She could just see it for what it was and talk about it from there. So what I'm going to share from right now are the 7 limiting beliefs in fundraising. And I actually have a little graphic of this I'm going to attach to the show notes so that you can download this and share it if you'd like. We have the 7 limiting beliefs in fundraising, and I'm going to share them with you. And if you have said these things or if you believe these things, that's no problem. All we have to do is find a better story to tell. And also knowing that our thoughts shape our words shape our reality. So let's create some stories that we're telling ourselves that are going to get us better outcomes. So the first one is, and I really do like this one, money doesn't grow on trees. This assumes that money is scarce and hard to come by. When that there's only so much money. Money doesn't grow on trees. Your parents probably said it. My parents, I've talked about my parents before. My parents were Depression era, kid. They were born in the 1920s. They came of age in Depression. They came of age in World War II. It was a very austere time. My parents would say something like, money doesn't grow on trees. This assumes money is scarce and hard to get and can cause frustration and stress. Money is abundant and available to you and your organization if you believe that it is. There's money all around you. All you have to do is connect to it. we have a belief, especially in the nonprofit space, of scarcity, that there's only so much money, that there's like, we have to get ours because there's only so many donors and so much money. And really the universe is abundant and limitless. And it's just a matter of opening ourselves up to that receptivity. What story would you rather tell yourself, right? Because either way, it's a story that there's not enough money or there's plenty of money. Why don't you just tell yourself the story that there's plenty of money? Because when you do that, now you're going to be looking for opportunities to validate those thoughts, right? If you think money doesn't grow on trees and money's scarce, you're going to remember all the times the money didn't show up, and you forget the times that the money did show up. And so by saying, hey, money is abundant, it's around me all the time. Now you're going to see it, and now you're going to start paying attention to that evidence. Okay, here's another one. Money is the root of all evil. That's, if you associate money with evil, then it becomes really hard to raise it. Money is a positive resource. Money is that gets our most important work done. Money takes on whatever connotation we give it, right? So if we give it that it's evil, then it'll be evil. If it's a good thing, if it's an important resource, it's an important resource. So if you're saying things like, well, money's the root of all evil, just be careful and check your story. What's a better story that I could tell? Because remember, my thoughts shape my words shape my reality. Right, here's another one. It takes money to make money. This is often stated, especially around like marketing initiatives and things like that. And it's sometimes used as an excuse to not move forward, right? So, we don't have that kind of money. It takes money to make money. Fundraising is about building relationships slowly and consistently over time, not about how much money you have to start. The more you ask for, the more you will receive. We often sometimes use our budget as an excuse, right? Because we don't, like, we're just a small shop. We don't have a big budget. Therefore, we can't accomplish big things. It doesn't take money to make money. It takes connecting and creating meaningful, long-lasting relationships and building communities of support. That's what it takes to make money. All right, another one is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. This is a really interesting dynamic to me because it assumes that there are haves and there are have-nots, and we're on one side of the fence or another, and that how much you raise is predetermined by how much others have or don't have. So many times somebody says to me, well, I have these people on my board and they're not made of money. And most people who are philanthropic are not made of money. They're people like you and me who give meaningful gifts to charity. We think that there are all these wealthy people who are going to write checks, and we tend to focus on the haves, right? And what they have, because we don't think these people have, but we all have assets. We all have gifts to give. How much I raise is not predetermined by how much others have or don't have. And when we say the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, we're calling out a separation. And then I think our focus tends to overfocus on sort of that magical unicorn group of donors with all the money that's going to make it easier for us to fundraise, which is not a thing. Most fundraising is moderate gifts made from everyday people like you and me. Okay, here's a couple more. I have three more. One is there's limited donor dollars. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but there is no limit to how much people will give when asked. The belief has caused nonprofits to operate out of fear and scarcity. Money is abundant and available, and there's no limit to what others will give. And we know this is true, like when there is a national disaster, a hurricane, right, a flood, and all of a sudden money flows in. Why? Because people step up and give. So if we believe that there's only a certain amount, then there will only be a certain amount. And we often say, well, there's only so much money in that pie, so we got to get that slice. And full confession, I used to say this, okay, when I was a consultant, when I was working, and because I believed it, I honestly believed it. I wasn't wanting to manipulate people or scare people. I believed it. Hey, listen, there's only so much money for philanthropy, so you got to gear up your marketing so you can make sure you get your slice of it, because that's what I was told, right? We say it to each other all the time. Well, there's only so much money, and the world is pretty vast, and the universe is unlimited, and it has everything we need. And so if we tap into that feeling of abundance and that that you're safe, you're secure, you're cared for, and the money will show up, then you can go out and raise it, right? Because you know that it's abundant. There's no ceiling. And again, sometimes I feel like we tell these stories so that we can have a reason not to ask for money, not to step out into maybe something that could be a little uncomfortable. Okay. 6-1, second to last. You can't raise money in a crisis. This is, if you think there are appropriate times to fundraise, then you think fundraising is a burden to a donor. Fundraising is a gift that attaches people to two things: their power and their purpose. Your organization is always worthy of investment. In 2008, we learned a very powerful lesson that we almost repeated in 2020, but I don't think quite as bad, which is in 2008, everybody cut their development when the housing crisis and all that and the recession hit. Everybody cut their development staff and their communication staff, because we're like, we can't ask for money now and we got to really trim the budget. Well, what happened is donors were like, wait, so I may not be in a position to give, so now you're not talking to me anymore. Like, wait, hold on. They felt left out from the lack of communication. They wanted a relationship that wasn't just about their ability to give or not. And we learned that really quickly, that it hurt a lot of people's feelings. And also people said, I will make the decision whether I can afford to or not. Right? If you don't make the decision for me. I always think of this story because when I talk about this raising money in a crisis and how people feel when they're not asked. So you remember that show, Everybody Hates Chris? I used to love that show. Anyway, Chris, the character, he was a Black kid. He went to an all-white Catholic school, and they would often send him home boxes of food. The principal, with all good intention, would assume that he was poor, and they were there. I would think they were a low income family, and he would send she would send the box of food home, and Chris is like on this bus lugging all this food home, these cans of food, and the mom would be like, what do we need this for? Like, we're not poor. So she would go and buy more expensive food and send it back as a donation. But the funny thing was, there was an assumption that something was needed. So anytime we assume we decide something for someone, people are like, wait, I'll decide. So you can raise money in a crisis. You can raise money anytime you want. Because if you think fundraising is a burden, I could burden somebody with that. No, fundraising is a gift. You're attaching people to their power and their purpose. And there's always a time, there's never a bad time to attach to your power and your purpose. All right. Second, or the last one, number 7, is we can't have too much money. Like my story of the Y Training Center, we said we can't look like we have money, or we can't have too much money. You want to have enough to create that impact, but you don't want to look like you have too much, right? Even the word nonprofit says you aren't worthy of investment or of too much money. God forbid, right? But you are good stewards of all the funds you receive and are worthy of investment at all levels. And part of what our industry does is we tend to sacrifice ourselves for others and tend to want to do for others. And instead of being the model that we want people to see, right? So we can't have too much money, or we can't look like we have too much money. You know what? You can have the money you need to do the best job you can, and you deserve that, and you're worthy of investment. I'll never forget, many years ago, Big Brothers Big Sisters of Eastern Missouri, Becky James Hatter, she's since retired. They remodeled their offices, and we were part of the team that did some interior signage and branding inside the new office. And I remember going in with her, and somebody said, oh, this is really nice, like almost like it was a criticism. And she said, yes, it is. And she said, our children and our staff deserve the best. They deserve to work in a comfortable, beautiful, well-lit space. And we got a bunch of tax credits. So it's like, yes, we are worthy of having a nice space. We are worthy of that. We are worthy of working and paying people good salaries. Whatever money we have, we will be good stewards of and use to maximum impact. So that's it. Those are the 7 limiting beliefs around fundraising. If you want to talk more about with me about busting through your fears and limiting beliefs and working to retrain your brain to serve you more effectively, revving up those thoughts to serve you more effectively, so you can create a better reality, I'm happy to talk to you about that. There's a little link in the show notes for you can book a quickie intro call with me, and I'm happy to talk with you. Always an invitation, never an obligation. I love connecting with people. If I can help you, I can. If not, I can certainly send you away with some really great resources to get you started. That's it for me on this episode of the Influential Nonprofit. I'll see you next time.